spirituality, mysticism and religion, they have no basis, they have no reason, and they have no logic. There is no evidence to all that. If I were a scientist 40 years ago, that's what I would have told. And is that the case today? I don't know. But modern science has been at loggerheads with spirituality. That a scientist of the past would definitely testify. Science, spirituality, I don't know about all that, but spirituality, religion and mysticism, it is very much real. It's been part of human cultures for, if not hundreds, thousands of years. It can't be false. All those past people can't be false. And this is beyond measurement. This is beyond what you can call as modern scientific evidence. It is beyond logic and beyond mind and brain. And it's beyond all of us that modern science is not yet understood. That is what a religious person would say. And that is where I think modern science and spirituality have been at loggerheads. So as we just heard, there are two sides to the coin. Modern science, mysticism, spirituality, these two words have not gotten along well in the entire past of human history, if I would say, or at least in the past 300 years of well-recorded history, if I'm not wrong. Is that the case for the future? Is that what our future generations 500 years down the lane they would be thinking? I'm doubtful. I'm a neuroscientist. I am an engineer as well. I work at Harvard University in USA. And I'm also interested in spirituality, religion and mysticism. As a pupil of both the worlds and as an interested student of modern technology, I think now the time has come for these two worlds to merge and converge and maybe lead into the future. So, spirituality, mysticism, whatever they might be, it might be somewhere in the air, it might be something that we can't measure. But as a human body, whatever I believe that, and I think modern science supports this notion that whatever is happening maybe in the mystic or spiritual world, it leaves imprints on the human body and more so on the human brain. And I would argue as a neuroscientist that we are our brain. What we think and our emotions, our feelings, our preferences, our choices, our attention and even our memory of our past and memory of our loved ones, our parents or the loved ones, it's all in the brain. Today neuroscience tells that if we were to damage these circuits in the brain, maybe we will not remember our parents, maybe we will not know how to concentrate, maybe we will not know how to meditate. There is ample evidence, I would say, that the brain is us, or at least the us as we manifest in this world. And spirituality and mysticism, they deal with us. They deal with the human body, the human mind. That's why I would argue that studying spirituality and mysticism through the eyes of modern science, specifically neuroscience and brain science, or I would say brain imaging as it has evolved in the last 20 years, I think that's the way forward for bridging this modern science and ancient science or modern science and mysticism world into something that might have tangible benefits for our generation and future generations to come. So it is in this world and in the realm of brain imaging, brain science and mysticism and spirituality that in this framework I believe there is a road forward in this direction. I would give you an example of some research that's already happened. It's not that we are starting from zero. There has been a good amount of research in this direction in the past, in the last 20 years. For example, today people have studied meditation, and in long-term meditators they have found that there is increased gray matter thickness, or it slows down aging. And short-term meditation enhances some brain connections which were not found in non-meditators. On the other hand, maybe for example mantra chanting reduces activation in certain parts of the brain which is helpful for attention and memory. And maybe meditation. It is even possible that so many other things could be studied in this framework, and even breathing has been studied, and even religious prayer in Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam and some Chinese traditions have been studied to some good depth, and people have found that such religious prayers reduces stress, anxiety, and propensity for mental disorders. So there is so much happened, but there is so much more to go. I think that there is a long way. So I invite all of you to this world of modern research on mysticism and spirituality and religiosity and religions, and explore this research and find out for yourself what is the truth. And I hope that this kind of research in the last 20 years and several centuries to come will lead the way for better life for our generations and the future generations to come. Okay, now I will go into more details. So I would give a title of Human Brain and Mysticism for this brief but detailed talk. So I'm Ranga Prakash Deshpande. I'm a research fellow at the Martino Center for Biomedical Imaging at Harvard. And I was trained in India, and I also have a background in mysticism and spirituality and some interest in that. And this work, I must say, is in collaboration with Gopi Krishna Deshpande, who is a professor at AU MRI Research Center at Auburn University. And I inherit a lot of ideas in this presentation from him. So what is this talk about? As you can see here, this talk is broadly about how brain and mysticism can be merged through physics and engineering, and how we can understand mysticism through all the modern technologies and techniques. We are our brain, as I was telling just a few minutes ago. The human brain has 100 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections. That's a lot to count. And the study of brain is the study of us. It is who we are. If you want to understand any aspect of yourself or your mind or your deepest consciousness or subconscious mind or your choices, you would want to look into your brain, and that's where you would want to start. So how much do we understand about our brain today? I think I'm sorry to say that not much really. We don't understand much. We know about the brain only as little as we know about the universe. But the universe and the human brain are the final frontiers in science, and science is advancing to a large extent in this direction, especially I would say in the last 20 years with the advancement of technology in all directions, especially in physics and engineering, has paved way for a lot of advancements in brain science, which helps us understand ourselves. So what would be the outline of the next 20 or 30 odd minutes you would be spending with me? I would be talking in the beginning about the brain and how to study the brain using advanced techniques, and specifically using MRI, or it is called magnetic resonance imaging, which is a new technology in the last 2 decades for studying the brain. And once that is done, I'll talk more about applications on meditation, mantra and chanting, breathing, religiosity, and so on. At this point, I would like to give a disclaimer that this talk is a purely scientific talk. This has no affiliation or inclination or bias. So first, with the human brain, I don't know how many of you are aware of this science that has advanced in the last 20 years. I'll assume you don't know much. The brain is just 1.3 kilos in weight, maybe 1/28th of our size, but it consumes 25% of the oxygen, 25% of all the energy. So it is a heavy resource organ. And it is a control center. It is like the CPU of a computer. And the current view is that the brain enables the mind. That was not the view sometime in the past. That's why I call it as a current view. So the brain is a physical organ inside the skull, and the brain enables so many functions. I'll give you an example using this dummy life-size brain. For example, the brain enables perception of smell, taste and touch. This is largely enabled by these parts of the brain. It's near the central sulcus. And if I were to injure this part of the brain during some accident, for example, maybe my sense of smell would go, sense of touch would go, or I might not be able to feel anyone who touches me or not be able to move. Likewise, vision. We are able to see because of the back part of the brain. This is called the visual cortex, and that's what helps us enable vision. And the side part of the brain here is called the temporal cortex, where primarily audio processing is undertaken. The ability to move, the ability to talk. For example, if this is the brain, this is called as the Broca's area, and this is what enables speech. Any injury to any part of this Broca's area is going to impair our speech, no matter how good our throats or voices are and how good our lips are. And likewise, the ability to concentrate, remember, plan 20 years into the future is driven by the frontal part of the brain, or it's called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the most advanced and latest advancement in the human species compared to all other species in the world, and that's what makes us human beings, a special being in their ability. Likewise, the ability to understand language, perceive music, play instruments, use tools. I think these parts of the brain are involved, and feelings of empathy, emotion, sadness, happiness, excitement, depression, anxiety, all these processes are driven by the brain, and there is ample evidence with today's modern science and neuroscientific research advancements that any impairment to any parts of the brain, these brain regions, is going to impair these functions. So what I'm trying to argue with this is that brain enables pretty much every kind of function that you can imagine yourself doing. Think of it, and there is some role of the brain. And as a corollary, what it means is that studying the brain is going to help us understand ourselves. This is a very important point I'm trying to stress repeatedly. And perhaps modulating the brain by passing currents or magnetic fields into the brain is going to alter our behavior and maybe make us more happy. So this is the background of the brain, and now I think you might be able to begin understanding why human brain is so important and related to spirituality and mysticism, because spirituality and mysticism deals with the mind and everything associated with that. So now I'll talk briefly about how we can measure and study the human brain. So there have been a lot of technologies that have emerged in the last 20 years in different scales in time and space. Some technologies are going to measure very big areas of the brain. They don't have good resolution in space, but they have good resolution in time. For example, electroencephalography, EEG. Some technologies have very good resolution in space. For example, functional magnetic resonance imaging, or what people call as fMRI, has spatial resolution of say 2 millimeters. But temporal resolution in time is maybe 1 or 2 seconds. So it is not capturing everything. So there is no technology that is going to capture everything about the brain. So we are starting with something imperfect, but it still informs something important and interesting about the brain that we did not know before. And in this talk, I'd like to focus on functional MRI, I think, which has caused a lot of overhaul and enhancement in our understanding of mysticism and spirituality. How has studying the brain evolved in the modern scientific history? EEG, as I mentioned, there you put EEG electrode caps on the brain and measure electrical activity from the brain through those electrodes and make some inferences from that. Another way to look at this is brain stimulation, which is one of the latest technologies. That is, transcranial electrical stimulation and transcranial magnetic stimulation have taken large strides in the last 2 decades. So here, electric currents or magnetic fields are given to some parts of the brain that will increase activity of those brain regions. So for example, with this, it is possible to enhance memory, enhance attention, maybe perhaps enhance your ability to meditate, enhance your ability to use tools, or maybe suppress your depressive feelings. So these kinds of things are possible with brain stimulation. I don't know, maybe 20 years down the lane, what kind of advancements would have reached your doorstep. And the last technology is brain imaging, which is mainly functional MRI, diffusion MRI, different modalities of MRI, and positron emission tomography, PET. So as you can see here, these are big and expensive machines where people go inside these machines and their brain activity in different parts of the brain is recorded over time or something of that sort, and we make inferences from that. This is a technology that did not exist 3 decades before, and before that it was not possible to study the brain in this manner. I think this is the breakthrough technology when it comes to understanding and merging modern science and mysticism. So this would be the focus of next part. I would be discussing magnetic resonance imaging for studying the brain. So MRI is basically a very powerful magnet, where these magnets and certain physics principles like the alarm frequency are going to enable us to get images of the brain. The first one is structural MRI. It is pretty much a photograph of the brain in 3 dimensions. So imagine like a 3D brain. If I were to open up your skull and look at your brain, that's how it would look. That is structural MRI. Diffusion MRI is going to give us how different neurons in the brain are connected. Of course, there are a lot of fine aspects to this. I'm really simplifying this for a lame audience. So take what I say with a pinch of salt, but this is what the technology does. Functional MRI is like a video of the 3D brain in how it is changing over time. So it's like my whole brain activity at this instant and at the next instant and at the next instant, so on, for maybe 10 minutes. It's going to inform us about what is a brain activity with 2 millimeter resolution over time. So with functional MRI, for example, we could do forward inference, like inferring which regions underlie different behaviors. Like we can understand which brain regions are required for working memory, which brain regions are involved in when we recognize faces or when we concentrate. So that is possible to study with functional MRI with a kind of accuracy and spatial accuracy that was not possible before with any other technology. And when it comes to reverse inference, for example, we can look at the functional MRI data and infer what a person is seeing. Maybe, I don't know, it might be possible 20 years down the lane I could do a fMRI scan on you and I can tell you what you're dreaming about. For example, a proof of concept study was published in Neuroimage by a group from MIT Harvard, where, as you can see in the image here, they showed the letter M to the participants. Functional MRI of their brain when they were seeing M, you were able to reconstruct the M in their visual cortex, back part of the brain, as you can see here. So this proof of concept shows that it will be possible to decode what a person is seeing, and it also extends to other things like what a person might be hearing, what a person might be tasting. A popular notion in the past is that it is impossible to know what you're tasting. If you're eating a delicious dessert, it is impossible to measure that. But now it is possible to measure that. People have done that, and it might even be possible to stimulate the taste again without even tasting the dessert. That is a technological advancement that our generation faces. For example, in this study, participants, they viewed a movie, a popular movie, The Good, Bad and Evil, and using a functional MRI, the researchers were able to decode which scene these participants were viewing. It is even possible to detect lies. Today there has been research on detecting lies in legal cases. Although we are not able to detect with 100% accuracy, we are able to detect with very high accuracy, and I think one day this will make into the legal system. Detecting lies wouldn't be a problem at all. So what I'm trying to impress upon here is that it is possible to detect, measure and objectively characterize the human mind and the brain. It is no more a big mystery that people thought it was. And in the next 2 decades, I think it would be possible to probe the deepest subconscious of the mind and deepest aspects of the brain and the mind. Maybe things in the spiritual realm, maybe things in the mystic realm, that which we're not able to study before. We can do it in the decades to come. So through various advanced techniques, it has been possible to explore the function of the brain to great depth in the last 20 years. And the brain basis of mysticism, importantly, people thought it was not possible to probe this, but now it is something that we can probe and study. So the last section of this talk, I would like to give you some examples of what research has already happened relating to brain imaging, brain science and mysticism. Before we go into what studies have been published, I would like to present the traditional view or the definition. The definition of mysticism is that it is spiritual knowledge that is not accessible to the common mind. That's how I would say people thought mysticism was. And what is the mind? It is the element of oneself that enables consciousness, enables experience in the world, and enables one to think. This is like the view of the past. And mysticism and mind, they do not have a physical basis. They cannot be measured, and they are beyond the understanding of the ordinary people and the ordinary human. I think that is what people thought for a long time. And I think that is the reason why these two different worlds have been loggerheads. But the modern and futuristic view, I think, is that spiritual knowledge can be measured and investigated. I wouldn't say everything, but at least there are several things that can be measured. And mind has a physical basis, it can be measured and manipulated. When it comes to modern science and mysticism and spirituality, there is a large amount of information in the internet. You can browse them for yourself. You might be getting WhatsApp messages in this. But I'm saying with a lot of sadness that most of this information is demonstrably false. There's a lot of falsehood and wrong information being passed around in the internet. So you must be very careful when you digest information into your mind. But my focus today is relatively small amount of peer-reviewed journal literature. There might be about 700 journal papers in this. Maybe 500 to 700 research studies have taken place which have done rigorous science, which are based on evidence and which are well-controlled studies. And definitely which is based on experimental evidence. My focus will be only on those things. There has been intense research, intense interest in this topic in the last 2 decades. I encourage you to explore that yourself. So when it comes to mysticism and neuroscience, spirituality is something that is not tied to beliefs and religions. So spirituality need not have a religion tag to it. But religion is based on certain beliefs and certain things that are not supposed to be questioned. So we must draw a proper line between religion and spirituality. And my focus here is actually on spirituality and not on any beliefs. Various types of meditation, spiritual practices and religious practices in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Jainism, in Christianity, in Islam, in Chinese traditions, all of these have been studied in great extent and for a good amount of time now. And among these, I have picked only a few research studies as examples to present here briefly, which I feel are scientifically rigorous, are published in reputed journals, and which are rigorously peer-reviewed, and which cover a spectrum of various links between brain and mysticism, and I think is of interest to the society and hopefully yourself, the viewer, and which holds important clues for the future. So the organization of this final section is, I would be talking about meditation, research studies on meditation, research studies on mantra and chanting, research studies on breathing, religiosity, and brain and body. So let's start with structural changes during meditation. So in this study done at Harvard University in the last decade by Sarah Lusser's group, they found that long-term meditators had larger gray matter thickness in the insula. It is this part of the brain, and it is a very important part of the brain, indicator of aging. So what they found is that there was larger gray matter thickness in this region compared to age match controls, which means that long-term meditation actually slows down aging in the brain. I wouldn't say in the body, I don't know about that, but definitely the brain's age is much slower in those who do long-term meditation. What about short-term meditation? In this study, which was published in PNAS, what they found is that there was a group of people who went through 1 month of intensive meditation training, and there was a control group which didn't go through that for a month. And what they found is that in those who did short-term meditation for just a month, there was increased connection between certain parts of the brain. White matter connections were made stronger, and these connections were actually important for better attention, better concentration, and better working memory. It shows that both long-term and short-term meditation has certain benefits as these evidences show. Now I'll talk about functional changes in the brain during meditation, which I think is interesting because that will enable us to understand what is happening in the brain during meditation. An interesting study was in a yoga master who claimed that he did not feel pain during meditation and yoga practice. For example, if I were to pinch hard or pierce a needle into his hand, he claimed that he had no pain. He felt nothing. And this was something that was impossible to testify or verify several decades ago. But now, a study was published in European Journal of Pain. And in this study, what they did is that the yoga master went into a MRI scanner and underwent a fMRI study. And during the study, a strong pain stimulus and needle piercing was done. And in a normal person like us, if this happens, there is extreme high activation in some pain regions in the brain. That is well documented. But in this yoga master, there was no such pain response in the brain, and which clearly demonstrated what he claimed, and it proved that this person was really not feeling any pain during the yoga and meditation. This is one of the interesting studies, and another few papers have been published in the study of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Several aphorisms of the Yoga Sutras and the paths of yoga and the concept of higher attention and better concentration during yoga practice. All these have been tested and many papers have been published, as you can see here. And all these Patanjali aphorisms have been proved right so far in all these published studies. I encourage you to go and check them out. Now let us come to a very interesting topic of mantra and chanting. For instance, if we take Shankaracharya or other such acharyas, chanting and japam and mantra are very integral to these philosophy, and it has also been integral to thousands of years of recorded history in India and even elsewhere in the world. So I'll talk first about structural changes in the brain in those who do mantra chanting. Specifically, I'll talk about Vedic priests. So in this study in University of Texas at Houston, they looked at structural changes in the brain in priests who went through 8 to 10 years of training and active priestly practice. And as you know, it requires very good memory, and they have to remember a lot and all these Vedic mantras and so on. And what they found is that these Vedic priests had higher brain cortical thickness in certain parts of the brain, as you can see in the figure here. And these brain regions are involved in enhanced memory, enhanced attention. Sometimes brain is a very complex organ. We can't tell exactly which regions are involved in exactly which task. Every region has a multiple function. What this study shows is that doing regular Vedic practice as it is done today has several benefits to the brain and perhaps to our life in the larger context. I'll also talk about this study in changes in brain function with mantra chanting. So this is functional changes in the brain, and this study was conducted in Israel and published in Brain and Behavior in 2015. And what they found is that during mantra chanting, for example, there are several kinds of mantra chanting that are part of our culture, and you might be exposed to some kind of japa or chanting. If you are doing any of that, that leads to widespread deactivation in many brain networks and brain regions. And this kind of deactivation is very helpful for improved attention, better working memory, better episodic memory, and better concentration. And these kinds of enhanced behavior, enhanced higher cognitive functions in human beings, which are special to human beings and which gives us a special and distinct advantage over other animals, and which gives special and distinct advantage to highly achieving human beings and high qualifications and so on. All these kinds of behaviors and achievements are associated with some kind of widespread deactivation in some kind of brain networks, which has an overlap with what we observe with mantra chanting. So this clearly shows that mantra chanting and japam and all these things has a strong effect on both brain structure and function, and has tangible benefits not just in the spiritual world but also in enhancing human abilities, which will help us achieve better. I'm not telling that is the purpose of these kinds of chanting, but this is what happens in the brain. In this study, in International Journal of Yoga, as you can see here, this study was a collaboration between India and US, between NIMHANS and Auburn University. They studied Om chanting and effect of Om chanting on the brain. I'll not go into the details. I have given reference to all these papers. If you are interested, you can check them out. It's available online. But what they found is that Om chanting had an effect very similar to the effect of vagal nerve stimulation. So vagal nerve stimulation is a kind of invasive in the sense some kind of a surgical procedure. It is an invasive treatment for mental problems. So what this study found is just doing Om chanting has an effect of a treatment. I'm not claiming that is the only benefit of Om chanting, but this study found that for mental problems, Om chanting can have a tangible benefit. So this is just one angle of Om chanting. I'm sure many studies will come in the future which will probe this further. But I think this will give a taste of what is possible and how much we can learn and understand and advance our knowledge in chanting and all these topics. Now I'll go to the topic of breathing. As you know, pranayama is an integral part of the yoga stream of philosophy in India, and it is largely followed India and worldwide. It is part of the yoga methodology. People have studied nasal airflow and brain activity. What does breathing with the left nostril have an impact on the brain? What does breathing in the right nostril have an impact on the brain? For example, with the pranayama, one of the theories is that breathing through the left nostril is going to have a calming and relaxing effect on the brain, and breathing just through the right nostril is going to have a more activating and energizing effect on the brain. This study, as I show here, they looked at this kinds of breathing and effect on the brain, and they indeed found that breathing through the left nostril had signatures in the brain of calming and relaxing, the kind of changes in the brain we observe during calming, and the opposite effect during the right nostril breathing. So this is really giving us two kinds of information. One, in some sense it is kind of proving in a modern framework many of the ancient science concepts. In addition to that, it is giving us more insight, it is giving us more information and understanding of these concepts, which will help us better understand chanting or better understand breathing or pranayama or meditation or religious prayers in any form of religion. It is helping us better understand this and digest it properly and practice it with more effectiveness. Finally, I will talk about religiosity and religion. I'll not go into much detail about this study, but what they found is they looked at religious people and non-religious people, and they found that people who are religious have some kind of a structural and functional difference in their brains, which are making them more religious. So being religious is not just about upbringing or the environment, but it is also about how your brain is wired. And you would also want to check out this study and many other studies on prayers. People have done the effect of prayers in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, because prayer is part of almost every religion. People have looked into that and found that across religions and across different kinds of prayers, prayer has a strong effect on the brain. It has a stress relieving and relaxing effect, and it also has an effect of improved mental well-being. So I think doing prayers is definitely something that is very helpful. Finally, I've been talking about the brain so far, but we must understand that the brain is just one part of the whole picture. Brain and body are highly interconnected. So a lot of research is happening today on brain-gut relationship. So for example, what we eat has an effect on our brain, which is something that our ancestors were telling to us, but that is something that today's science is probing in great depth and trying to understand better. I think I'll conclude my talk here. Thank you for being patient and listening to this. I would like to summarize few take-home messages, what you could take home, what you could learn from this. Regarding the brain and MRI, I would say that we in this world are our brain. And the brain science has accelerated maybe 100 times in the last 20 years. And it is interdisciplinary science. And revolutionary technologies like MRI have really enhanced our understanding of the brain, and in the next 20-30 years there is going to be a major leap in our understanding of the brain through these technologies. And coming to brain and mysticism, which is the focus of this talk, I think the take-home message is that mysticism, spirituality or religion has a brain basis and a body basis. It doesn't happen in the air. That is something we have to digest based on modern science. And all these topics can be experimented, they can be measured using advanced techniques. And because of all these advancements, worldview has changed in the last 30 years. Now, I don't think topics like yoga or meditation, they are respected in the world and they are better understood. And people can no longer claim it as sham because of all the research that's happened. But there are so many other things that are still open questions and open to investigation. And I'm sure that in decades to come, and maybe in our generation and generations to come, there's going to be a lot of research into this, and modern science is going to give us a lot of shed a lot of light on these topics. Finally, I would like to thank my family and my advisors who have been highly instrumental in making me who I am and enabling me to give this lecture to you. And I would also like to thank Sri Ranga Mahaguru and Sri Vijayalakshmi Sri Mata from Ashtanga Yoga Vijnana Mandiram, who have been a strong inspiration for me, and Gopi Krishna Deshpande, who is my co-author, co-investigator in these topics. He lived from 1913 to 1969, and he gave us a framework to study ancient science and spirituality, that is Vishaya, Prayoga and Anubhava, which translates to hypothesis, experiment, observation and inference, which is what modern science is all about. And he followed this in the earlier 20th century. What is astounding about this is that science and mysticism were considered totally incompatible to each other at those times. And critical questioning and inquiry were not welcome in religious circles. At this time, he brought this kind of thought process, and that has inspired us to probe further in this direction. Thank you very much. I would welcome questions via email. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this lecture entertaining and useful, and I hope you choose careers which will help us advance this science and technology.